Ever since I have been able to play video games, I have been a Sonic the Hedgehog fan. And I mean that very literally. The very first game I ever played was the original Sonic the Hedgehog for Sega Genesis. It never mattered how many games I got into, what genres they were, settings, anything. Sonic was consistent in being one of my favorites. So, naturally, when I got to the point in my life where I started using the computer and internet more often, I would frequently look up games that I liked to see what would come up. Of course, Sonic was one of the biggest components of that. I came across things like Sonic Paradox, Sonic Sprite videos where it's like Sonic and his friends are living together in a big-ass house and all the voices are text-to-speech. Some animations that were legitimately really good. You get the idea. All the staples of 2000s era Sonic internet culture.
Tails!
Sonic!
And I know what you're thinking. How could I possibly fail to mention the seemingly endless amount of Sonic the Hedgehog fan games? Flash games, downloadable games, YouTube videos showcasing fan games, including ones that were only demonstrations and you could not actually download. By the way, Sonic GL. I'm still waiting. But something I really spent a lot of time watching videos of that wasn't a fan game was Sonic 06. It was fairly new at this point in time, somewhere around 2008 or 2009, and I didn't have a 7th generation console to actually play the game, so I would watch a lot of the cutscenes, playthroughs of different levels, stuff like that. I don't know if any of you know who 019 is, but I became very familiar with that name at this point in time. I remember he actually made a video on how to win the Silver the Hedgehog boss fight, and I committed the technique he used to memory.
So what you want to do is just keep running away from him. And when you hear him go, how about this, that means he's going to throw stuff at you, and as soon as he does, you just want to hit him and then dash away.
And when I finally got an Xbox 360 and had the opportunity to play the game myself, sure enough, I beat Silver really easily. Silver himself is actually a character who I took a lot of interest in. I always thought it was cool how he was from the future and stuff. He could fly and use psychokinesis for no discernible reason. Between the other characters in the games who didn't do anything close to that, besides maybe Shadow, I thought he was really cool, and I still do even today. But, of course, it didn't stop there. You know I scoured the internet looking for even the slightest hint of information regarding the possibility of Silver the Hedgehog getting his own standalone video game. Similar to how Shadow got one a few years prior. By now we know that hasn't happened, God knows if it ever will, but that didn't stop me from looking up Silver the Hedgehog game every single time I went on the computer. The results of my searches varied somewhat, but ultimately I did find one video in particular. It was simply titled Silver the Hedgehog the Game. I look at this and I'm like, am I reading this right? With that thumbnail? Could it be? I click on the video and watch it in its full, low FPS 240p glory, and I was absolutely blown away by what I saw. As far as I was concerned, the world of Sonic fan games had reached its peak, and this was the man responsible, Dan Bosley. Silver the Hedgehog Worlds Collide was released on a website called Yo-Yo Games, which is the name of the developers of Game Maker. Game Maker is a free-to-use game development engine that you can use to make all kinds of different games. Some insanely popular games were made using Game Maker actually, including Undertale, or more recently Deltarune, Rivals of Aether, Hotline Miami. This thing gets around. When you visit the Yo-Yo Games site these days, you'll see them showcasing all kinds of games like these ones on their front page, and that's about what you would expect. You can't play or even buy them directly on the site, but they do link to each given game's Steam page. Though this is not what I'm referring to when I say Silver was released on the Yo-Yo Games website. Once upon a time, Yo-Yo Games used to have this section of their site called the Sandbox. The Yo-Yo Games sandbox was this huge collection of games that anybody who had a copy of Game Maker could upload their stuff to, whether it was a hastily thrown together demo or a fully realized game. The best part? It was all 100% entirely free. Of course you know I looked through pages and pages of Sonic fan games and demos. And as mentioned a moment ago, this is how I played Silver the Hedgehog Worlds Collide. I didn't even know if my computer at the time would run the thing in any capacity. I wouldn't have been any older than 11 years old, and I knew fuck all about computers or how video game system requirements worked. All I knew, for sure, was that it was Windows 98, and it could play Star Wars Episode 1 Pod Racer. So I mean, hey, my chances could have been worse. My memory of the setup process is a bit hazy, but you had to download and install some kind of launcher. It wasn't like Steam, where you use the launcher to browse and install games to play them. It was kind of like a browser extension. It just made it so when you clicked the big green play game button, the game would magically launch on your computer. So I installed everything I needed, had a Yo-Yo Games account ready to go, and prayed as I clicked the play game button. Words could not begin to describe how excited seeing this screen made me feel. Against the odds of my computer not being able to run the game, there it was. Even today, starting this game up and seeing Eggman appear with this eerie music in the background makes me feel the same way as it did back then. With that, this screen gives you a brief rundown on what's going on. As you can see, our main villain here is Eggman. Well, to put it simply, I would prefer to not accidentally trigger some kind of language filter if you catch my drift. So I will refer to him as Eggman Brother. Eggman Brother has some kind of newfangled invention called the Dimension Tunneler. It's capable of, ripping open the fabric of space. Dude doesn't waste any time. He gets straight to doing just that. His whole plan is to eventually destroy the world, and then create a new world of his own where he can basically be worshipped. He was a whole decade ahead of Thanos. After the opening text crawl, we get a shot of Silver just hanging out and enjoying life. He notices pretty quickly that Eggman Brothers' robots are off in the distance destroying the place. He's simply not having it, so off he goes. I actually really like this premise. It's creative and interesting without being overly complicated. It gets the ball rolling and throws you into the actual game without wasting too much time, which I'm a fan of. One of the biggest things this game does well right away is the emphasis on Silver's style of gameplay, utilizing his psychic abilities like flying and, of course, psychokinesis. Psychokinesis is controlled by using the mouse cursor, and as you can see, it's a cute little silver hand. It's a very intuitive method of using something like psychokinesis in a video game. I feel it lends itself to you being able to be a lot more deliberate with your choices of what you want to pick up and where you want to move it. The main thing you use PK on are these metal boxes, which have a handful of uses. You can throw them at enemies to blow them up, you can stack them on top of each other to reach higher platforms, and you can even use them to grab item capsules. I actually didn't even realize you could use them to get the capsules until I started making this video. Anyway, besides the boxes, there are also these yellow floating platforms you can move around. They aren't affected by gravity at all, so they just stay in place wherever you put them, allowing you to make a path for yourself to new areas. This is a really cool idea. It seems like an extension of that weird thing Silver could do in Sonic 06 where you could jump on top of something like a box and make it levitate underneath you. That was always pretty janky, so it's nice to see something that feels a little bit more thought out. It's not foolproof though, because as you can imagine, due to the nature of these platforms just being able to be put anywhere, you can kind of use them to get wherever you want. It's not horribly game-breaking or anything. In fact, it's probably more effort to use the platforms to skip everything versus just playing the game normally, but it is worth addressing. Psychokinesis can also be used on these small armadillo enemies, and to defeat them you just fucking smash them into the ground. Doing this always makes me feel like such a dick. They're so helpless. You're also able to grab enemies' bullets they fire at you and send them back to blow them up, which feels a lot less evil and is pretty fun to pull off. There are also a couple of extra uses for PK here and there, you get the picture. Bosses are a ton of fun to fight too. There are only so many of them, so I won't give too many examples for the sake of spoilers, but I'll talk about a couple of them. The first boss is pretty standard, a big-ass bipedal scary robot man. The way he works is he stands on a platform on the right side of the screen and shoots at Silver from it, with Silver being on a slightly lower platform on the left side of the screen. You cannot jump up to the boss's platform, but boxes spawn above you and fall to the ground throughout the fight. So you have to manage dodging all the bullets and not getting crushed by the boxes as they fall. And you grab the boxes and throw them at the boss all the way until he blows up. Pretty straightforward, but I think that's what you want for the first boss in a video game. Also, I want to point out that this particular boss plays an "all your base are belong to us" voice line when he appears.
All your base are belong to us.
Yeah, this game was definitely released in 2008. I wouldn't even be that surprised if half of you didn't know what I'm talking about. A lot of the dialogue in this game is very of its time, let's say. It's not bad, just kind of funny. If anything, I think it just helps sell the authenticity of this indeed being a late 2000s fan game. For better or for worse. One other boss that I had a lot of fun with was the fourth boss in the Frozen Peak zone. You ride a minecart on a track that you move back and forth on, and Eggman Brother drops bombs on the track from above. The way you defeat him is by using PK to grab the bombs in midair before they explode, and throw them back. It is a bit hard because there is not a lot of distance between the bombs being dropped and them hitting the ground, but I think the set piece is really cool if nothing else. The force the bombs hit the ground with, and the speed at which explosions fly past you is legitimately really well done. There are, of course, a lot of bosses besides these, all of which have their own gimmicks that make them each unique and interesting, including the final boss. But for the sake of not spoiling the entire game, I will leave it at just that. As you would expect, Silver the Hedgehog Worlds Collide contains a pretty decent variety of zones throughout the game. There are 7 of them total, and there's also the final zone where the final boss takes place. By this point, you've more or less seen them all, besides the final zone, which, again, I won't be spoiling. Some of the zones are pretty typical, like Crystal Falls and Frozen Peak, but that's not a bad thing. I do like how in Frozen Peak you can see Silver's breath in the cold, it's a good detail. Some people wouldn't include something like that. One of my favorite stages though is Windmill Canyon. I couldn't exactly specify why, but there's something about the aesthetic of this big ass labyrinth in the sky that I just adore. The clouds flying past you, along with the introduction of bird robots, really helps sell it. I think I may have a bias for sky levels just in general. Sonic 2's Wing Fortress, Flying Battery, and Sonic 3. I always thought Mario airship levels were cool, stuff like that. Levels that are high up in mountains or something similar I also like. There's just something about it. Anyway, we're veering off the point a bit, so let's get back to Silver. One other zone worth highlighting is the 7th zone, which actually is called Worlds Collide. The idea with this zone is this is the point in the game where dimensions are starting to go out of control, due to Eggman Brothers' Dimension Tunneler. The worlds are colliding, so to speak. This is conveyed in the zone itself because the whole thing incorporates elements from every zone before it, whether it's the terrain you walk on, platforms, enemies, or background elements. It's remarkably well done. New mechanics are also introduced throughout the game that add just an extra pinch of variety throughout a playthrough. The minecarts I mentioned previously, these things called flyers, cannons, and a couple of others. The music in every single zone is so fucking good. This might be a weird thing to freak out over, because you're probably figuring, well, yeah, it's a Sonic fan game. If it's using Sonic music, of course it's going to be great. Even in the bad Sonic games, the music has always been the best thing about them. Like, yeah, Infinite might be the shittiest villain introduced in a Sonic game up to this point, But are you really gonna listen to his theme song and you're gonna sit there and not be like,
When everything you know has come and collapsed along with dying rising high, only scars remain all through. We're finding the ashes to this.
But the point I'm trying to make here is that nearly all of the music in Silver the Hedgehog Worlds Collide is composed by the creator of the game, Dan Bosley. This includes the main theme, which plays during the title screen and is the song I used in the intro earlier. There are for sure a couple of songs here and there that aren't made by Dan, like the Game Over music is just from Sonic Advance, and the theme for the first level is Cliffs of Dover by Eric Johnson, but these are few and far between. Dan is seriously talented with music, and it was one of the things I subscribed to his YouTube channel for. As you might expect, my favorites were the handful of covers he did of Sonic music. Night of the Wind, His World, and Splash Hill Zone are all on his YouTube channel right now if you want to go have a listen. I also really loved his original songs, which he uploaded a lot more of. I will admit it's not really the sort of music I would listen to these days, but I'll be damned if it doesn't take me back. Alright, it's time to come clean. I've been hiding something from all of you, and it's time to reveal what it is. You wanna know? This isn't even my first time making a video about this game. Yeah, that's right. On my original, very first YouTube channel, when I finally found a free program that could record the desktop of my old as shit Windows 98 computer, I recorded an entire playthrough of Silver the Hedgehog Worlds Collide as a series, one video per zone. I also recorded the bosses separately and put them in their own videos, but in hindsight I have no idea why I did that. The point is, the videos themselves actually got a pretty decent amount of traction. I couldn't really tell you why. I guess I might have been the only one who uploaded a full playthrough, but that's not the important part. What happened was, after I uploaded maybe the first 2 or 3 videos, I was eventually greeted by a comment on one of them that stood out among the rest of any comments I'd gotten on videos up to that point. Dan Bosley himself was there, in my comment section, thanking me for playing the game. I was starstruck, in utter disbelief. I don't even remember how I replied. I know I did, and it was surely something along the lines of, "Hey, thanks for commenting, I love the game." But him commenting on my video at all was a lot to process. I can't check those videos or comments these days because that channel was eventually. But Dan's comment on my video of his game kicked off various interactions we would have with each other, and over time we became pretty friendly. We never talked especially often, it was maybe a couple of messages every few weeks, but I do have him added in a couple of places still. He seems to be doing pretty well for himself, albeit he does keep busy. Something I would like to highlight from his and I's interactions specifically is how I would constantly ask him about a Silver the Hedgehog Worlds Collide sequel. I feel like I must have annoyed him with how often I asked about it, and I'm sorry Dan, I was 12. He never acted that bothered by it, but I do feel a little embarrassed thinking about it sometimes. The point is, I wasn't asking just because I thought he should make one. He made it pretty clear a handful of times that he actually already had one in development. So I would very, consistently, let's say, ask him about the possibility of sending me a demo, or a beta, whatever, that I could play early, because I was just so excited for it. For a long time, as you might expect, he didn't really have much for me. He didn't have a ton of time to work on it at that point, which, in hindsight, I understand. He knew I wanted to play it really badly, but he simply did not have anything to give me. But one day... It had been a little while since I last heard from him, but again, that is just sort of how we communicated. The contents of the message, however, I could not have been prepared for if I tried. He actually sent me a working demo for Silver 2. I was a bit older by this point, I think maybe 14 or so, but I was still ecstatic. Reading that message and downloading the files he sent me was like opening a Christmas gift. I put everything on hold and played the game immediately. Now, as much as I would love to show you footage of Silver 2, I regrettably must admit that I cannot. Make no mistake, I have held on to that fucking exe file like my life depends on it. I have gone through 4 different computers in that time, and probably over 10 Windows installations. I made goddamn sure to keep that file this entire time. I even have it backed up on a server that one of my friends has set up in his house that he lets me use. I don't even do that for tax documents. I'm not losing this fucking thing. But alas, me ensuring that I still had the game does not help against one thing. Compatibility. The game does not run on my current machine. It just will not start. I can click to open it, and its process will appear in the task manager, but nothing else happens. This happens with the original version of the first game too. The last time this one worked, I think, was still on Windows Vista. I tried running virtual machines to maybe get it working that way, but I had a bunch of issues with getting that going too. So as of now, I am without footage of the second game. Okay, so, as it turns out, the problem is that VirtualBox sucks dick. While I was editing this video, on a whim I decided to give it one final effort. Some Google searches here and there, troubleshooting, all that fun bullshit. Eventually, I tried using VMware instead of VirtualBox. And it worked on the very first try. So, here you go. The game was decently far into development, but again, due to other commitments, Dan had to slow down a lot and eventually stop altogether. Which is unfortunate, but these things happen. I'm grateful that he even found the time to put something together for me. That said, I won't show too much here on the off chance that Dan does resume work on it one day. Who knows, if he finishes it, I may even have to make a second video. Anyway, I think that's more or less everything I wanted to cover. We got a little off track near the end there with me going into some more personal stuff, but I think that's a huge component of why I am so attached to the game. That's absolutely not to sell it short though, it's legitimately a great game, and I seriously do recommend it. I'll have the link to the current download in the description. There are some caveats with the current version, I will admit. It seems a bit buggier than I remember, but it's nothing that breaks the game. For example, the font for the HUD elements doesn't display correctly. Invincibility capsules give an error message when you collect them, but otherwise work fine. And my personal favorite, attempting to grab these floating spike balls generates the loudest sound in the known universe. This one actually has always been in the game, but I wanted to mention it because I think it's funny. Again, none of these bugs ruin the game, far from it, but they are oddities I think you should be prepared for when getting into it. I enjoy this game immensely, and I still revisit it every so often, and I think you will enjoy it too. I have played every level tons of times, and at one point I even had all the cheat codes memorized. Remember when I went on that big stupid rant about cheat codes in the Spider-Man video? Yeah, this game has them. You know that means bonus points from me. Anyway, I'm all done here. Takeaway is, this game is great, you should play it, it's free, and once again I have it linked below. If you're a longtime Silver the Hedgehog fan like I am, I think you owe it to yourself to at least give it a try. Let me know how you like it in the comments. Or better yet, head on over to Dan Bosley's channel and tell him how you like it. I'm certain he would love to hear it. Thank you for watching as per usual, I appreciate it a ton if you made it this far. Subscribe for more and all that fun stuff if you enjoyed it, and if you are interested, I also do streams on Twitch. I've been in the middle of my first ever Silent Hill 2 playthrough, and it's been nuts. I'm loving that game so far. I hope to see you there. That's it from me. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.